In this video, we are going to set up version 9 of Elastic and Kibana on a single machine. This video is going to be a bit lengthy, so if you already have experience with previous versions of Elasticsearch, you might benefit from the shortened version of this video, which I will link to in the description. For the members of our channel, I will upload another version where I set up version 9 of Elastic and Kibana on two different machines. I will use Let's Encrypt certificates for Kibana. For people who really want to use publicly signed certificates with Elasticsearch, I recommend using TLS termination through a reverse proxy. For example, putting Nginx web server in front of Elasticsearch, then applying your publicly signed certificates against Nginx. You can also use your own privately signed certificates with Nginx. Nginx will then direct traffic to your Elasticsearch instance or your Elasticsearch cluster. When it comes to security, Elasticsearch is just like any other database, and you want to be strict on what services can access it. Nginx can contribute to the role of being a gatekeeper in terms of protecting your Elasticsearch cluster. If you want to learn more about using reverse proxies, I have several videos on this topic. Two of them are specific to Elasticsearch and are for paid members. And one more note before we get started. Based on my limited experience so far, it seems that many of the configurations, tools, and settings in version 9 of the ELK stack is the same as version 8. That means many of the older videos on my channel are still relevant. Version 9 claims to offer better performance, optimization, and security. I'll speak to these once I have more experience with version 9. So let's get started. Let's go ahead and install Elasticsearch and Kibana version 9. I'm going to follow the instructions on this website here, the official documentation. And because we're using Ubuntu, we will install with Debian packages. So basically, the instructions on this page here for installing Elasticsearch. And for Kibana, if you scroll down here, you can get the instructions for installing Kibana, which we're going to use Debian packages because we're on the Ubuntu operating system. So most of the instructions are here, but there are a few extra steps that I recommend you do that's buried in all this documentation. So what I've done is everything we're going to do in this video, I've summarized on this web page over here. And you'll see that here in the introduction, I link to all the documentation here. So what you're seeing here is really just a summarized version of the official documentation. I've got a instance of Ubuntu 24.04 hosted in a cloud provider. This has 8 gigabytes of memory. I think it's quad core or 2 CPUs. I recommend at least 8 gigabytes of memory because if you don't, Elasticsearch might run out of memory and you might get the OM out of memory errors in your systemctl and other logs. The public IP address for this server is 172.236. Sorry, let me say that again. It's 172.236.102.50. In this documentation here, or the summary, you're going to notice that I did this initial practice in a local virtual machine, just in my private network in our office. In this demonstration, we're going to do it in a cloud provider. So that way you get two different flavors or two different variations. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, because this is a brand new instance of Ubuntu, I'm going to update the repository libraries, update distributions for any packages that we might need. And I'm also going to install Vim, curl, the zip library, newpg, and gbg, just because these are common tools that are often needed. So I'm just going to go ahead and paste that here, and I'm going to let this thing run. And once things are finished updating, I will resume recording. So I'm going to pause for a moment. While the system was updating, sometimes I get these notices about changing defaults or changing some modified items. Anyway, anytime I get these types of prompts, I just accept the defaults. So let me just, okay, so we'll let this thing go. Our system should be up to date now, and it's at this point that we're actually ready to start installing Elasticsearch and Kibana. So for installing Elasticsearch, we'll need the public signing key, update for some more packages, update the repository definitions, update again, and finally install Elasticsearch. So I've already got those instructions here, nicely copied here. So I'm going to copy this and just make a file. I'll paste this in here. I will just save it, make it executable, and we go ahead and just run it. All right, looks like everything is updated. My computer screen is a little bit small, so you may have missed it, or you would definitely have missed it, which is after Elasticsearch is installed, you will get this Elastic super user with this password here. So you do want to remember this. I'm just going to copy this and I'll just paste it in here so we don't forget it, because we're going to need it to log in later. So we're ready to move on to editing the Elasticsearch configuration files. So let's go ahead and edit that. And when you look at this file, it's very similar to version 8. In fact, when I looked at it before, I really couldn't tell the difference, or if there were any differences between version 9 and version 8. So all our steps from our previous tutorial still apply. Let's give our application or our Elasticsearch instance a name. So we'll call it ESDemo. I found that at least in version 9, you don't have to explicitly give a name to this particular node. It'll automatically figure it out, or I think it'll just use node 1 as default, or it might grab it from your host name. For the attributes, I haven't fully tested it yet, but in my initial test, they work just like they do in version 8. They're going to be used for shard allocation, index lifecycle management, and data streams. So we have an entire video series on that if you want to learn about that. I'll link to it in the description. Path.data, yeah, that hasn't changed. The logs will be here. And most of these settings we don't need to edit. For network hosts, it is recommended, or one thing you can do is, I'm going to use this 0.0.0.0 so that any application from any IP address can access this instance of Elasticsearch. The alternative is only for localhost or for itself to reference itself, or you can state the IP address of just this machine. But we're going to make it accessible from all machines for this lab or demonstration purposes. The default port is 9200, so we're not going to change that. We'll just leave it commented out. So use that default. And these settings here are going to be relayed for multi-node clusters, which we'll talk about in future videos. Or actually, I've already talked about it in version 8. We have an entire series on that. But from my initial test, it seems like version 9 works pretty much the same way. So we'll do a quick run through of setting up a multi-node Elasticsearch cluster in a future video that will be coming shortly. But if you still want to know how it works, just watch our older videos. And these security features, from what I can tell, they're pretty much the same as version 8 when it comes to setting up TLS certificates. In this video, we're just going to use the certificate authority that Elasticsearch has already set up, and the privately signed certificates that were automatically created. We're just going to use whatever Elasticsearch gave us. For in terms of SL, this is for the REST API, and these settings here are for inter-node communication, for various nodes to communicate with each other within a cluster. And now we have many different videos in our members area that talk about different ways you can configure these if you want to. But for now, I recommend just using the TLS certificates that Elasticsearch has made for multi-node clusters. And that's pretty much it. So at the end of the day, we only modified 2 fields. We named our cluster and we made it accessible from other IP addresses. So let's go ahead and exit out of here. And by the way, those 2 things are also exactly what's documented in this instructions over here. So they only talk about modifying these. I guess you can turn this on when you're ready to do multi-node clusters, but for our purposes, it's only a single node, so we don't really need to do this yet. And yeah, the rest of this is for multi-node clusters. So let's go ahead and make sure all these files are owned by Elasticsearch. Now, I don't know if it matters in version 9, but I know in version 8, if some of these files aren't owned by the Elasticsearch user, then we might get some permission issues that prevent the cluster, the multi-node cluster or the single node cluster from starting up. Now let's enable Elasticsearch. Reload the daemon. And start up Elasticsearch. So this will just take a moment and I will pause until this thing is up and running. I think things might be up now. Let's check on the status. Okay, great. So we're not seeing any errors. So what we can do is we can do a quick ping of the REST API with a command like this. So we'll just curl it. Oh, before we can curl it, we will need to remember our password, which is this. So what I'll do is curl a GET request. The user is Elastic and the password. And the URL is HTTPS. Actually, I don't remember our current IP address, so let me ping that as well. Or IPA. Okay, now let's run this command again. Curl get -u elastic the password HTTPS 172.236.102.50 on port 9200. And we're gonna pass in the certificate authorities certificate certs. Okay. All right, and this shows that we've got the cluster running. It's or single node cluster running using version 9. So this is good. We've got our Elasticsearch instance up and running. Now, I often find the password hard to remember, so for a lab in a demo situation, I'd like to reset the password with this command here. And what this command here is that, in fact, let me show you something. If I go to USR share Elasticsearch binary directory, these are the command line tools that come with Elasticsearch. And one of the commands that you can run is Elasticsearch reset password. Now, everything you're seeing here is also in version 8. So from what I can tell, it's pretty much the same. So let's go ahead and run this command, and we're going to reset the password for the Elastic user. I'm going to pass in also the flag -i so that I am asked interactively for the password. Otherwise, it just automatically generates a random password, which is more secure. But for my purposes, I just want to make it easy to remember the password for demonstration purposes. A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4. A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and now if I were to do that curl again, you'll get a security error or an authentication error. And at this point, you can type A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4, and now we get a success. So I think that's all there is to setting up Elasticsearch. Now we're ready to move on to installing Kibana. And when you're installing Kibana, the first few steps is downloading all the dependencies, updating the repository definitions before you install Kibana. And you'll notice that all these steps are the same as installing Elastic, meaning we already have all these dependencies, and the only thing we need to do is install Kibana. So I will just go ahead and do that because both our Kibana and Elasticsearch are running on the same machine, so they use all the same resources and all the same tools. Okay, so that's, we'll wait for Kibana to install, and then afterwards, we're going to need to make TLS certificates for Kibana. So I'll let this thing finish first. Okay, it seems like Kibana has been installed. All the files we need are here. Here's the configuration file we're going to edit. Now in this documentation, they don't immediately talk about setting up TLS certificates for Kibana. So although there are TLS certificates between Elasticsearch and Kibana, so that when Kibana and Elasticsearch communicate with each other, that traffic is encrypted. However, the communication between your web browser and Kibana by default does not have TLS certificates, and they don't talk about setting that up. Let's see, I don't think they talk about it right off the bat. Yeah, they have a separate page for setting up TLS certificates for Kibana and the web browser. It's buried somewhere in the documentation. So what I did was I went ahead and provided the documentation for setting up TLS certificates for Kibana. Because Kibana is on the same server as Elasticsearch, we're going to reuse the Elasticsearch cert util command to generate the TLS certificates for Kibana. Okay, so first thing we're going to need is, okay, so what we're going to do is the Elasticsearch has the certificate authority over here. Elasticsearch cd certs. So in here, here's the certificate authority, or the certificate for the certificate authority, but the private key is in this P12 file. This P12 file includes both the certificate and the private key, but we need to extract the private key out of here because to create a TLS certificate for Kibana, we want it signed by this certificate authority. So to do that, we need to pull the private key out of here. And this P12 file is password protected. So we need to figure out what that password is. And we're going to use the Elasticsearch key store. We're going to list all the key value pairs in the Elasticsearch key store. And one of them, this is going to have the password to extracting the private key from this P12 file. So let's list all the key store values or key store pairs in Elasticsearch. Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and the password is going to be in here. So I'm going to copy this. Copy. And let's do show this property. Oh, I think that is I think I copied wrong. Go over here. Copy, paste. There we go. And that's the password for the P12 file to extract the private key. So I'm just going to paste it in here for a moment so I don't lose it. And what we're going to do then is use this OpenSSL command, take this P12 file and output the private key as http://ca.key. And when prompted for the password, we will need it. In fact, let me just copy it to a different location actually. I'm going to put it into a notepad on my desktop. So let me get that. Okay, I pasted the password on a notepad on my second monitor. And now I will take this command, run it. It's asking for the password. I'll paste it in here. And now I should have the private key. And with the private key and the public key, I am able to create new TLS certificates signed by this Elasticsearch certificate authority. So how do I create that TLS certificate for Kibana? We can do it with this command over here. So I'm going to copy, and maybe I'll go over to the Kibana directory and I'll call it make cert. Paste it here. And what this command does is it'll use the Elasticsearch cert util command line tool. We're going to create a certificate. We're going to save it as a zip file to our Kibana directory as kibana.zip. We're just going to name the files inside this kibana.zip file as kibana.crt and kibana.key. The certificate authority files here are these. This is the public certificate. This is the private key. And we're going to have it, the domain name or the IP address that this certificate is for should be for this machine. So I'm going to do this. And let's paste it in here. Now, if you're not using IP addresses and you're using domain names, then you could just, instead of doing this, you do DNS and you paste in, something.something.com. So that's how it would look more like this. But because we're using IP addresses, I'll do it this way. Okay, so we're going to save it in PEM format. Then later we're going to move over to the Kibana directory, unzip the file that we just made, which is this, and we'll rename the folder from Kibana to certs. And let's see, these two steps, in fact, we're going to need the certificate authority for Kibana. So that's why I'm going to copy it over from Elasticsearch into Kibana, change the ownership of the Kibana directory before we do any more configuration. So let's go ahead and do this. Make certs. And I think just like that, we now have the certs directory. And inside the certs directory is our new TLS certificate for our Kibana, along with the private key. And this is the public certificate for the certificate authority from Elasticsearch, which Kibana needs to reference when using this certificate. All right, so we've got our certificates. Now we're ready to talk about modifying Kibana.yaml, which is basically where this documentation actually starts. Or actually, they've got things in a slightly different order. But because we're using TLS certificates, that's why we're just swapping the orders around. First thing we're going to do is edit the Kibana.yaml. Let's do that. What I've got here is the server port. By default, it's 5601, so I don't need to make any change to that. The default is localhost, which means you won't be able to access it publicly. It's only this server can reference itself, which is not useful to us. So we'll make it publicly available from any IP address. And the server base URL, I think, in fact, I keep forgetting the IP address. Maybe I should just save it to my notepad. I'm just gonna copy this, paste it to my notepad on my second monitor. Then I don't always have to keep checking for it. Okay, so public URL, because we're using TLS certificates, we're gonna start with HTTPS, paste in the IP address, 5601. All right, anything else? Anything else? Oh, we need to turn on the TLS certificates. So we will go over to the SSL lines over here. So this will be true. In fact, instead of just typing everything out, I'll copy this and then I will paste it here. Okay, so we've got that, and that's all we need to do for this Kibana.yaml file. All these other settings like Elasticsearch, username, password, service account tokens, and Elasticsearch certificate authorities and all that stuff, where we don't need to manually edit those because we're going to create something called an enrollment token. In fact, the documentation here does talk about it. Elasticsearch will create an enrollment token, and when we pass this special token into Kibana, Kibana will just magically configure the remaining options here. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Yep, so enable Kibana, reload the daemon, start Kibana, and just keep an eye on the Kibana status. So let's do that. And I will pause until it's up because I don't think it's up right now. I think it's... Okay, yeah, it's not up yet. When it's up, what you're going to see is a line like this at the bottom. So I'll pause until things are up. All right, looks like Kibana is up because when I do systemctl status, I am told to go to my Kibana server from my web browser and paste in this code, or actually just grab this whole URL, and we're going to see the next steps to set up Kibana. So I'm going to go to my web browser and load in this URL, but replace 0000 with the actual IP address of your server. Okay, I tried to load up the URL, but I'm getting an error. Oh, sorry, this is a typing mistake. I have to type 5601. Oh, and I need to be on HTTPS. There we go. All right, so just accept the security risk because it's an we're using Elasticsearch certificate authority, which is not bootstrapped with my web browser, which is Firefox. It's a private CA, so naturally browsers like Firefox and Chrome and Microsoft Edge and such, they won't have it bootstrapped with your operating system. Anyway, here we're asked for an enrollment token, and we get this from the Elasticsearch server. So what we do is we go back to the Elasticsearch command line tools and use the Elasticsearch create enrollment token Kibana. So let's copy this and go to the server here. And this should give us a token. There it is. It's this really long one here. Copy. And then I will paste it in here. And then we just press configure Elastic. And this might take a few minutes, but once it's done, everything should just be up and running. Looks like things are up and running. A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4. And this looks okay. All right, let's try testing out by creating an index. Skip tour, and maybe I'll actually, yeah, let's just run this. Create an index. Let's put a record inside the index. And let's search the index. Great. So Kibana and Elasticsearch are up and running and working well together. There's one more thing I often like to do is I want to hide some secrets. If I look in this Kibana.yaml file and I go all the way to the bottom, I'll notice that these few lines have been added to this Kibana.yaml. When we put that enrollment token into Kibana and press configure Elastic, it effectively just made these new entries. This line here, all right, this service account token, this is actually a secret, which I don't like leaving visible in this file, just for security reasons. So I want to put this in the Kibana key store. And we do that by, first thing I'm going to do is copy this, because in fact, I'm going to copy this whole line and paste it into my notepad on my second monitor. And we're going to use this Kibana key store command line tool to put this secret into this property. And then I'm going to delete it from kibana.yaml. When we start up Kibana, it will read from the Kibana key store and load this into the running instance of Kibana during runtime. That way, people will never see this secret in the actual file itself. So let's go ahead and run this command. Paste. I'm going to take that copy from my second monitor, paste it in here, hit enter, and then go into kibana.yaml. And now we actually delete it from this file. Systemctl restart Kibana. And we go ahead. Oh, that was fast. But I think it still takes a minute or so for it to fully load. And while it's loading, let me just show you this. So in the USR share Kibana binary directory, these are the command line tools that come with Kibana, just like how in Elastic, these are the command line tools that come with Elastic. So I think that's interesting to note. I don't know if it's up and running yet. We can also test by pressing refresh here. Yeah, I think it's not yet. Oh, okay, maybe it is up now. A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, this looks good. Let's do a search again. All right, that's working. In fact, let me try adding something like this. And then I'm going to search everything. There should be 2 records. 1, 2. Okay, so that's pretty much all there is to setting up Kibana and Elasticsearch. For anyone interested, I've already uploaded a video showing how to set up Elasticsearch on one server and Kibana on another server, and we use Let's Encrypt TLS certificates with Kibana. Or you can just move on to the next video where we show how to set up Logstash.